The letter arrived on a Monday morning, and it did not knock. It did not give Adise Okonkwo any warning. It did not come wrapped in grief or apology. It came in a white envelope with a notary stamp in the upper left corner, slipped under her office door sometime between 7:15 and 7:45 when she had stepped out to get her coffee. She almost stepped on it. She picked it up the way you pick up something you are not worried about, and she set it on her desk, and she sipped her coffee for a full 2 minutes before she opened it. She read it once. Then she set it down and looked at the wall for a moment. Then she picked it up and read it again. Her name was Adise Okonkwo. She was 29 years old. She had graduated at the top of her class from the University of Lagos Faculty of Law. She had passed the bar examination on her first attempt. She had worked for 3 years at one of the most respected estate and property law firms in Lagos before opening her own practice 18 months ago, a clean, spare office on the 4th floor of a building in Victoria Island with her name on the door and not a single decorative item she had not personally chosen. She had represented clients in property disputes that ran into hundreds of millions of naira. She had won most of them. She was not a person who panicked. She read the letter a third time. The letter was from the office of Barrister Chukwuemeka Okonkwo, her cousin Emeka's lawyer, and it was informing her, with great legal precision and almost no warmth at all, that under the terms of her late grandfather's estate, specifically Clause 14, Subsection 3 of the original will dated the 4th of March 1974, the entirety of the Okonkwo family estate, the land in Ibejuleki, the commercial property in Surola, the shares in Okonkwo Trading Limited, and the combined liquid assets totaling $4.2 million would pass to the next eligible male heir of the Okonkwo line on the date of the estate's final settlement, unless the named primary beneficiary, Adise Grace Okonkwo, was legally married at the time of that settlement. The settlement date was Friday. It was Monday morning. She put the letter down. She picked up her phone and called her best friend Bissy, who answered on the second ring with the cheerful voice of someone who had not yet had their world rearranged by a single typed paragraph. "I need you to come to my office," Adise said. "Good morning to you too," Bissy said. "Bissy." Something in her voice must have communicated everything because Bissy said, "I'm on my way," and hung up. Adise sat in her chair and looked at the letter on her desk and did the only thing she knew how to do when something had gone wrong. She began to think. Her grandfather, Chief Emmanuel Okonkwo, had died 3 months ago at the age of 88. He had been a man of enormous presence, enormous stubbornness, and outdated ideas about almost everything which in his lifetime Adise had loved him enough to overlook. He had been proud of her. He had told her more than once, sitting in his large chair in the house in Surola, that she was the sharpest of all his grandchildren. He had said the estate would be hers. He had never, in any of those conversations, mentioned Clause 14, Subsection 3. She had not read the full will herself. She had trusted the family solicitor, old Barrister Ademi, who had read it aloud at the family gathering and summarized it in the way old men summarize things they find embarrassing, quickly and with a great deal of coughing. She had not asked to see the original document because she had not thought she needed to. She knew now that this had been an error in judgment, and she filed that knowledge away under things she would not repeat, and she returned her attention to the present problem. The present problem was this. Her grandfather had written a will in 1974 that required his primary beneficiary to be married, and he had never updated it, and the settlement date was 4 days from now. Emeka's lawyer had not sent this letter out of family loyalty. Emeka was her cousin on her father's side, the son of her grandfather's second son, and he had spent the last decade being wrong about everything in the most confident possible way. He had made poor investments. He had borrowed money from people he should not have borrowed from. He had watched Adise build a successful legal career with the quiet, burning envy of a man who had been told all his life that he was important and had found that the world did not agree. If the estate passed to him, he would sell the Ibejuleki land within a year to cover debts that Adise suspected were larger than anyone in the family knew. The commercial property would follow. Her grandfather's life work, the thing he had spent 60 years building, would be gone in 18 months. She was not going to let that happen. Bissy arrived 22 minutes later, which meant she had taken a taxi and not waited for her driver. She came in, closed the door behind her, sat down across from Adise, and read the letter without saying a single word. Then she looked up. "Friday," she said. "Friday. As in this Friday, 4 days from now." Yes. Bissy put the letter down with great care, the way you put down something you are afraid might bite you if you move too quickly. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and the particular composure of someone who had spent 10 years in corporate finance and had seen human beings do remarkable things for money. She and Adiz had been friends since their first year at university, and she was the only person Adiz fully trusted, which was not a category Adiz had ever had many members in. Your options, Bissy said, are the following. 1. You challenge the clause in court on grounds of discrimination. 2. You find a man to marry before Friday. 3. You let Emeka have it and spend the rest of your life not forgiving yourself. Option 3 is not an option. I know. Option 1 is not viable in 4 days. Even if I filed today, an emergency hearing would take at minimum 2 weeks, and the clause is legally sound. It was properly witnessed, it was never contested, and the courts will uphold it because it is what the testator intended, regardless of how anyone feels about it. Which leaves option 2. There was a silence. Yes, Adiz said. Bissy looked at her. Every man you know is either married, impossible, or someone you have professionally embarrassed in court. I am aware. Patrick from your first firm is married. Kelechi moved to London. The man who asked you out at the Bar Association dinner last year, you told him he had misread the room. He had misread the room. Adiz, he had. This is not the moment, Bissy said very carefully, to have standards. Adiz stood up and walked to the window. Below her, Victoria Island was going about its morning with complete indifference to her crisis. Taxis and buses moved through the traffic. Office workers crossed the street. The sun was the same sun it had always been, hot and bright and entirely uninterested in her problem. She stood there for a moment and then she turned around. I'm not marrying someone I know, she said. I cannot. If I marry someone in my professional circle, it becomes a story, it becomes gossip. Emeka's lawyer is already watching me. If this marriage looks arranged, looks convenient, looks like exactly what it is, he will find a way to challenge it. He has to believe it is real. Everyone has to believe it is real. So what are you saying? Adiz sat back down. She pulled her laptop toward her and opened it. I am going to find someone who is not connected to my professional world, someone who needs money, someone who is discreet, someone who will sign a contract, perform a role and disappear when it is over. Bissy stared at her. You are going to advertise for a husband. I am going to make a private listing on a restricted professional network. It is not the same thing. It is exactly the same thing. It is more elegant. Adiz, do you hear yourself? I hear myself clearly, she was already typing. And I hear the alternative, which is Emeka selling my grandfather's land before the man is even cold in his grave. So yes, I hear myself. Bissy was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, what kind of man responds to something like that? We will find out, Adiz said and posted it. She had worded it carefully. She had said, seeking a man for a short-term contractual arrangement of a personal nature. The arrangement will be fully legal, properly documented, and will require discretion, professionalism, and the ability to present well in formal settings. Compensation is negotiable and will be agreed in advance. Duration 90 days maximum, no emotional entanglement, no public exposure beyond what is necessary. Responses must include a brief professional background and a contact number. Serious inquiries only. She did not use her name, she did not mention the inheritance. She set up a separate email address that was not connected to her firm, and she posted the listing on a private legal and finance professionals network that required a verified account to access. It was not public, it was not traceable to her without effort. It was the best she could do in the time she had. Then she closed the laptop and went back to work, because there were 3 client files on her desk, and a court appearance on Wednesday that she still needed to prepare for. And she was not the kind of person who let one crisis swallow every other responsibility. The first response came 40 minutes later. By lunchtime, she had 31. By the time she left the office at 7 that evening, she had 47. Bissy, who had stayed and read them over her shoulder for the first hour before declaring the exercise genuinely disturbing and retreating to her own phone, had provided commentary on the early responses that was both unhelpful and accurate. One man had attached a photograph of himself in what appeared to be a rented suit in front of a building that was not his. Another had written a response in all capital letters that went on for 6 paragraphs about his personal values. A third had listed his income in 3 different currencies, all of which were incorrect. A fourth had asked what no emotional entanglement meant specifically and whether there was room for discussion on that point. But one response was different. It was 2 sentences. I am available and qualified for the arrangement you have described. I can meet at a location of your choosing within 48 hours. No photograph, no list of credentials, no explanation of why he was available or why he was interested or what he needed the money for, just 2 clean sentences and a phone number. Adiz read it 3 times. She did not know why she was reading it 3 times. The response told her almost nothing. She had no idea who this person was, what he did, what he looked like, or whether he was serious. He had not even given her a name. But the other 46 responses had given her names and photographs and entire paragraphs of information, and none of them had made her feel the way this one did, which was the feeling you get when someone in a room full of noise suddenly speaks quietly and everyone turns to look. She wrote back at 8:15 that evening from her kitchen table, with a cup of tea she had forgotten to drink going cold beside her laptop. She said, tomorrow, 11 a.m. the Terrace Cafe on Walter Carrington Crescent, dress professionally, come alone. The reply came in 4 minutes. Confirmed. She put her phone down and looked at the wall of her kitchen for a moment. Then she picked up her cold tea and drank it anyway, because she had never been able to throw away a full cup of anything, and she went to bed, and she lay in the dark for a long time thinking about Clause 14, subsection 3, and the fact that she was meeting a stranger for coffee tomorrow to discuss whether he would marry her. She did not sleep well, but she slept, which was more than she had expected. In the morning she dressed with deliberate care. She chose the gray suit, the one she wore to important negotiations. She did her hair the way she always did it for court, clean and precise. She wore the small gold earrings her grandfather had given her when she passed the bar, because she wore them whenever she needed to remember what she was doing this for. She ate a full breakfast, because she had learned long ago that hunger made her less sharp, and she could not afford to be less than completely sharp today. She arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early, chose a table at the back with a clear view of the entrance, and ordered water. She did not order coffee because her hands were already steady and she wanted them to stay that way. He walked in at exactly 11 o'clock. She noticed 3 things in the first 5 seconds. The first was that he was tall, which she had not specifically thought about but noted now as a fact, the way you note weather. The second was that he moved through the cafe the way certain people move through rooms, not looking around to see who was watching, not adjusting his posture for the benefit of an audience, simply walking toward the table she had chosen as though he had already decided the room was fine and could now give it his full indifference. The third thing she noticed was his watch. It was a simple watch, clean face, leather strap, nothing flashy, but it was the kind of simple that costs more than it announces, and she noticed it the way a lawyer notices things, not because it mattered right now but because it might matter later. He sat down across from her. "Adiz," he said. "You have the advantage of me," she said. "You know my name, I do not know yours." "Dara," he said. He did not offer a last name. "Shall we order first?" "We can get to that. I would prefer to begin with your questions." He looked at her with an expression that was almost a smile but not quite. "I only have 3. She waited. "The first," he said, "is whether this arrangement has a legal basis that protects both parties equally." "It does. I have a draft contract that covers compensation structure, duration, behavioral expectations, exit provisions, and a confidentiality clause that is binding on both sides. The second is whether you have considered the risk that someone who knows you personally will challenge the authenticity of the marriage." "I have. That is why I am not using anyone from my professional or personal network. That is also why I need someone who can present convincingly in formal settings. And the third," he said, "is whether the contract, as drafted, allows either party to walk away without penalty if circumstances change in a way neither of us anticipated." She looked at him. "That is a very precise question." "Yes, my current draft does not include that provision. I can add it." He nodded once. "Then I have one suggested amendment before I agree." She pulled her folder from her bag and set it on the table. "Tell me." The exit provision should require 30 days' notice from either party, not 14. Circumstances of the kind we are discussing rarely resolve in under a month. She looked at the contract. He was right. 14 days was too tight. She had written it quickly, under pressure, and she had been thinking about her own need for an exit rather than the operational reality of what they were agreeing to. Agreed, she said. She made the note. Anything else? No. Then I need to know that you understand what this requires. It is not simply a signature on a document. You will need to attend at least one family event. You will be interviewed potentially by legal representatives challenging the validity of the estate claim. You will need to have a story. Our story. We will need to agree on the details. I understand, he said. And the compensation? I am offering 400,000 naira per month for 3 months, with a completion bonus of 200,000 if the estate matter is resolved without legal challenge to the marriage. He looked at her for a moment, not at the number she noted, at her, as though he was deciding something about her that had nothing to do with the money. That is acceptable, he said. She extended her hand across the table. He shook it. His grip was firm and brief and entirely professional. We should agree on a backstory, she said. How we met, how long we have known each other, why we are marrying now. We met through a mutual colleague at a professional event, he said without hesitation. 8 months ago, we kept in touch. The relationship developed gradually. We decided to formalize it now because of a family matter on your side that made the timing relevant. She looked at him. That is very close to the truth. The best cover stories are. She studied him for a moment. He was sitting across from her with the kind of calm that was not the calm of someone who did not care, but the calm of someone who had decided before he arrived how this meeting was going to go. She recognized it because she did the same thing. She decided the shape of things before they happened, and then she walked into them as though the shape had always been there. You are very prepared, she said. You are not the only one who reads documents carefully, he said. She almost asked him what he did. She almost asked why a man who spoke like this, who asked questions like this, who moved like this, needed what she was offering. She had 46 other responses from men who had given her everything about themselves without being asked, and this man had given her almost nothing, and she was choosing him anyway, and she wanted to know why she was choosing him anyway. But she did not ask, because she had said in the listing that no emotional entanglement was required, and she was the one who had written that, and she was going to hold herself to it. Wednesday, she said, the Eiktja Registry Office, 9:30 in the morning, bring your documentation. I will have the contract ready for signatures by tomorrow evening. I will be there, he said. He stood up. He did not extend his hand again. He gave her a brief, precise nod, the kind that means I have understood everything that was said and everything that was not said, and he walked out of the cafe. She sat for a moment in the quiet he had left behind. Then she looked down at her folder, at the draft contract with the new note in the margin, 30 days, and she thought about the watch. Simple face, leather strap, the kind of simple that costs more than it announces. She flagged the thought, filed it away, picked up her phone and called Bissy. Well, Bissy said. Wednesday, Adi said. A pause. That fast? I need a husband by Friday. Wednesday is already cutting it close. Another pause, longer this time. Who is he? His name is Dara. Just Dara. Just Dara, she said. The cafe around her was full of people having normal lunches on a normal Tuesday, and she sat among them with a contract in her folder and a wedding in 2 days, and the distinct feeling that she had just shaken hands with someone who was more complicated than he had allowed her to see. She paid for the water she had not drunk and walked back to her office. She had work to do. The contract took her until midnight to finalize. She did not usually work until midnight. She was disciplined about her hours because she had learned in her first year of practice that a lawyer who did not sleep made errors, and errors in law had a way of compounding until they became disasters. But this contract was not for a client. It was for herself, which meant she held it to a higher standard than she held almost anything else, and she read every clause 4 times before she was satisfied. She sent it to him at 12:17 in the morning from the separate email account with a cover note that said, "Please review and confirm by tomorrow afternoon. Any issues, call the number at the bottom." His reply came at 12:42. Reviewed, no issues. I will sign Wednesday morning before the registry. She stared at that for a moment. He had reviewed a 12-page legal contract in 25 minutes and had no issues with it. Either he had not read it carefully, which she did not believe, or he had read it very carefully and found it acceptable, which raised the same question she had filed away in the cafe. Who was this man? She closed her laptop. She would find out or she would not find out. Either way, Friday was coming, and the estate needed protecting, and she was going to do what had to be done. She went to bed and set her alarm for 6, and this time she fell asleep quickly, the way she always fell asleep after a decision had been made and could not be unmade. Outside her window, Lagos moved through the night in its restless, unending way, full of people making their own arrangements with circumstances that had not asked their permission, and in the morning everything would look the same, and almost nothing would be. Bissy arrived at Adi's apartment at 8 on Wednesday morning with a small bag that contained, as she explained while handing it over, things you might need for a wedding that you planned in 48 hours. Inside the bag was a simple ivory blouse that Bissy had clearly bought that morning because it still had the receipt in the pocket, a bottle of perfume, a small mirror, and a packet of biscuits. The biscuits, Adi said. In case you forgot to eat breakfast. I ate breakfast. Did you? She had not eaten breakfast, she took the biscuits. They took Adi's car to the Eichtje registry office, and they arrived at 9:15, which gave them 15 minutes before Dara was due to arrive. The registry office was a government building that looked like every government building in Lagos, tired but functional, with fluorescent lights and plastic chairs and a front desk staffed by a woman who had clearly seen everything and had opinions about none of it. There were 2 other couples in the waiting area, both of them young and visibly nervous in the way that people are nervous about things they want very much. Adiz sat in a plastic chair and did not look nervous, because she was not nervous, or she was choosing not to be. He walked in at 9:30 exactly. He was wearing a dark navy suit, white shirt, no tie, top button open. He looked like a man who had decided what professional meant to him and was comfortable with that decision. He was carrying a slim folder. He saw her cross the room and sat in the chair beside her without any particular ceremony. You brought the documentation, she said. Everything on the list you sent. He set the folder on his knees, the contract. She opened her bag and produced the printed contract, 2 copies, already signed by her. She had signed them at 6 that morning, at her kitchen table, before she had eaten the breakfast she had then forgotten to eat. He read it, both copies, every page. She watched him do it and said nothing, and beside her Bissy sat with her hands folded in her lap and also said nothing, which for Bissy was a significant exercise in self-control. He signed both copies with the pen she offered him, in the same unhurried way that he did everything, and she countersigned as witness on his copy, and he countersigned as witness on hers, and they exchanged documents, and that was the contract done. The ring, Bissy said. Adiz looked at her. You need rings, Bissy said, in the tone of someone who had thought of something that 2 lawyers had somehow overlooked. They ask you to exchange rings. A silence. The registry does not actually require exchange of rings, Adiz said. It is a traditional gesture, not a legal requirement. The people who are going to be watching this marriage for signs that it is fake, Bissy said carefully, will notice if there are no rings. Another silence. Dara reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and produced 2 rings. They were simple gold bands, both of them plain and clean. He set them on the folder between them. Adiz looked at the rings for a moment. You thought of this, she said. I thought of it yesterday, he said. I should have mentioned it, I apologize. Where did you get them? A jeweler on Broad Street. If they are not the right size, they can be adjusted. I estimated. She picked up the smaller one and slid it onto her ring finger. It fit. She looked at him. I guessed from your hands at the cafe, he said simply. She did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing, which was something she was good at. The ceremony itself took 11 minutes. The registrar read the legal declaration. Adiz said I do in her normal voice, clear and steady, the voice she used in court. Dara said I do in a voice that was equally clear and equally steady, and she had a brief, strange thought that they were two people who were very good at saying things out loud without showing what they felt, which was possibly the most honest thing they had in common. They exchanged rings. She put his ring on his finger and he put hers on hers, and the registrar announced them legally married, and Bissy, sitting in the row of plastic chairs behind them, let out a breath that she had apparently been holding for the entire ceremony. They signed the marriage register. Her signature first, in her usual hand, confident and forward-leaning. His beneath hers. She glanced at his signature, the way she glanced at things she did not mean to look at but looked at anyway, and then she looked away. It was not the signature of a consultant. She did not know what it was the signature of, but she knew what a consultant's signature looked like, and it was not that. She filed it same place as the watch. The registrar congratulated them. The other couples in the waiting area were not paying attention. The woman at the front desk was on the phone. Nobody marked the moment except the four of them, Adiz, Dara, Bissy, and the man Dara had brought as his witness, who was a quiet, ordinary-looking person who shook hands with everyone when it was over and left the building immediately without saying anything further. Outside, on the steps of the registry office, the sun hit them like it always hits you when you come out of a fluorescent-lit building, bright and immediate, and not interested in the specific weight of what you have just done. She was legally someone's wife. She had known this was coming, she had planned this. She had drafted the contract and reviewed the legal framework and managed every step of the process with the same methodical care she brought to every case she handled. She had done everything right. And still, standing on the steps of the Eicher registry office on a Wednesday morning in her gray court suit and her grandfather's gold earrings, with her new husband standing 2 feet to her left and her best friend making a sound behind her that was not quite a sob and not quite a laugh, she felt the full strangeness of it land on her all at once, like something she had been carrying at arm's length had just, without warning, gotten very close. She turned to him. Emeka's lawyer will be notified this afternoon. I will file the marriage certificate with the estate solicitor by end of business today. That should stop the Friday settlement from proceeding. Good, he said. I will be in touch when there are further developments. I understand. She looked at him for a moment. In the sunlight he was very clear to look at, which was somehow different from how he had been in the cafe or in the registry office, or maybe the light was just honest in a way that indoor light was not. Thank you, she said. He nodded once, the same nod as before. I have understood everything that was said and everything that was not said. He walked to the car that was waiting at the bottom of the steps, and she noted, because she always noted things she was not supposed to note, that it was a very quiet car, and the driver opened the door before he reached it. Then he was gone. Bissy came to stand beside her. Well, Bissy said. Do not, Adiz said. I was only going to say that he had very good posture. Bissy. And that his suit was not from any shop on Broad Street. We should go, Adiz said. I have a filing to make. She went down the steps and got into her car and pulled out her phone and called the estate solicitor, and her voice was entirely steady, and her hands were entirely calm, and the ring on her finger caught the light for just a moment as she lifted the phone to her ear, gold and simple, and exactly the right size. She did not think about that. She had work to do. She sent the marriage certificate to Barrister Ademi at 3:17 that afternoon. She sent a copy to Emeka's lawyer at 3:19 by email, with delivery confirmation requested. The email was brief and professional. It stated that she was now legally married, and therefore fulfilled the conditions of Clause 14, subsection 3, and that she would expect the estate settlement to proceed in her name according to the original terms of the will. At 4:45, her phone rang. It was a number she did not have saved, which usually meant someone who had gotten her number through a professional channel. She answered. Ms. Okonkwo, said the voice on the other end. It was smooth and careful, the voice of someone who had practiced sounding pleasant. This is Barrister Akari, representing the interests of Mr. Chukwuemeka Okonkwo in the matter of the Okonkwo estate. I am calling to acknowledge receipt of the document you submitted this afternoon. Good, she said. We will of course need to verify the document. It is a legally registered marriage certificate from the Eicher Local Government Registry. It is verifiable through the official records. I encourage you to verify it. A brief pause. We will also need to be satisfied that the marriage is genuine. She let a small silence sit there, not long enough to seem defensive, long enough to let him understand that she had heard the implication and was not impressed by it. The marriage is registered in accordance with the Marriage Act, she said. My client has fulfilled the conditions of the estate clause. If you intend to challenge the settlement, I would advise you to be very certain of your legal grounds before doing so, because I will respond to any challenge with the full weight of every remedy available to me. Another pause. I see, he said. Good evening, Barrister Akari. She ended the call. She sat in her chair for a moment with her eyes on the filing cabinet across the room, and the ring on her finger, and the specific feeling of having bought herself 4 days of breathing room that might not be enough. Emeka was not going to accept this quietly. She had known that before she posted the listing, before she met Dara in the cafe, before she stood in front of a registrar and said I do to a man whose last name she had not yet asked. She knew what was coming. She just did not know the exact shape of it yet. But she had a husband, and she had a legal marriage certificate, and she had $4.2 million worth of reasons to figure it out before anyone else did. She picked up her phone and sent a message to the number she had for Dara. Emeka's lawyer has confirmed receipt and indicated they will be challenging the marriage's authenticity. I will need us to meet again this week to prepare. Are you available Thursday evening? The reply came in 3 minutes. Yes, same cafe, 7 o'clock. She looked at the message for a moment. Then she put her phone away and turned back to her desk and the 3 client files that were still waiting for her, patient and indifferent to the fact that she had gotten married that morning and might be about to enter the most complicated legal fight of her career. She opened the first file. She began to read. Outside, Lagos continued its afternoon in the particular loud, golden way of Lagos afternoons, and somewhere across the city, in a quiet car with a driver who opened doors before they were reached, a man named Dara was presumably doing whatever it was that men like him did at 4:45 on a Wednesday, and she still did not know what that was, and she was still telling herself that it did not matter. She was still telling herself that on Thursday morning when she woke up, and still telling herself that when she got dressed, and still telling herself that at 6:50 in the evening when she left her office for the cafe, wearing the gray suit again because it was the one that made her feel most like herself, and the gold earrings from her grandfather and the ring. She was still wearing the ring. She had told herself that morning that she would take it off, because she was only going to a professional meeting with the man she had hired to play the role of her husband, and wearing the ring to a meeting with him was not required. She had not taken it off. She arrived at the cafe at 7 exactly and he was already there, already seated at the back, already waiting with the particular stillness of a man who is comfortable with waiting, and she sat down across from him, and the evening light came through the windows in long flat slabs of gold, and she put her folder on the table and said, Emeka's people are going to investigate. I know, he said, tell me everything. So she did, and he listened, and somewhere in the middle of it she realized that she had been talking for 6 minutes without stopping and he had not interrupted her once, not to ask a question, not to redirect, not to fill the silence with his own voice the way most people felt compelled to do. He simply listened with his whole attention the way very few people knew how to do. She finished, she looked at him. He said, how long do we have before they move? A week, possibly 2. Then we have work to do, he said, and he opened his own folder which she had not noticed until now, and inside it she could see that he had already begun making notes. She looked at the notes. He had written down in clean, precise handwriting the question, what is the story they will check first? And beneath it his answer, the story of how we met. She looked up at him. We need to be ready, he said. Yes, she said. The waiter came, they ordered coffee. The evening moved around them in the soft, ordinary way of evenings in restaurants, full of other people's conversations and the smell of food and the clink of glasses, and at their corner table 2 people who had gotten married that morning sat across from each other and began, very carefully and very deliberately, to build the story of how they had fallen in love. The investigation began on Monday. Adiz knew it had begun because Bissy called her at 9 in the morning and said, in a voice that was trying very hard to be calm, Someone just called my office asking if I knew you. What did you say? I said yes, I have known you since university. Then they asked how long you had been seeing someone named Dara. Adiz went still. What did you say? I said you had been seeing him for some months. I said he seemed like a serious person. I said you had told me about him around Christmas. A pause. Was that right? That was perfect, Adiz said. Do not elaborate further if they call again. Keep everything vague and warm. Adiz, Bissie's voice changed slightly. Who is he? Not who he said he is. Who is he actually? What makes you ask that? Because the person who called my office was not a family member. They were very polished. They were asking very specific questions. They sounded like they had done this before. Adiz set down her pen. I do not know yet. You do not know? Not fully. A long pause. You married a man you do not know. I hired a man to fill a legal requirement. I know what I need to know. Adiz, I need to go, Bissie. Thank you for handling it the right way. She ended the call and sat for a moment with the pen in her hand and the specific discomfort of knowing that someone who had called Bissie was not working for Emeka's law firm. Emeka's law firm was competent but not polished. Whoever this was had resources that Emeka, with his bad investments and his borrowed money, did not normally have access to. She picked up her phone and sent Dara a message. They have started. Someone called my closest contact this morning asking about you. They were professional, not the kind of professional Emeka's people usually are. She sent it and waited. The reply came in 11 minutes. I will explain when we meet. Can you come to this address tonight? He sent an address in Ikoyi. She looked at it for a moment. Ikoyi? Not Surulere, not Yaba, not even Victoria Island. Ikoyi, where the houses were set back from the roads behind walls and gates and the kind of quiet that only money could buy. She wrote back 7. He replied, I will send my driver. She looked at that, my driver, not there is a car available or I can arrange transport. My driver, the way people who had always had drivers said it, without thinking about the specificity of the pronoun. She filed it, same drawer, getting crowded in there. She finished her workday. She prepared for the Thursday court appearance she still had. She reviewed the argument she intended to make and found it sound. She ate a sandwich at her desk at 1 in the afternoon because she had remembered, this time about lunch. At 6:30 the driver appeared in front of her building, exactly as promised. The car was the same one she had seen outside the registry office. Black, quiet, a make that she recognized but that you did not typically see outside the compounds of people with a specific level of wealth. The driver did not ask for her name. He simply held the door open and she got in and they drove to Ikoyi. The house was behind a gate. Not a large gate, not a gate that was trying to impress anyone, but a gate that was solid and well-maintained and that swung open before the driver reached it, which meant there was someone watching, and that the system knew the car and that the car was expected. The house itself was set back from the road behind a garden that was mostly clean lines and low shrubs. It was not large, by Ikoyi standards. It was the size of a house that someone would choose because they wanted the space and the location and the quiet, not because they wanted people to see how large their house was. She got out of the car. The front door opened before she reached it. He was standing in the doorway. He was wearing a dark shirt and trousers instead of a suit, which was the first time she had seen him in anything other than a suit, and she noted, because she noted everything, that even without the suit he moved and stood in the same way, which meant the way he carried himself was not the suit's doing. Come in, he said. She came in. The inside of the house was like the outside, clean, considered, not performing for anyone. Good furniture chosen by someone with taste rather than someone with a desire to display taste. Books on the shelves that appeared to have actually been read. No photographs on the walls or the surfaces, which she noticed because the absence of photographs told you as much as their presence would have. He led her to a sitting room and she sat, and he sat across from her, and there was a small table between them with 2 glasses of water that someone had already set out. The people who called your contact, he said, were not working for your cousin. She had already suspected this. Who were they working for? He looked at her for a moment with the look she had begun to recognize, the look of a man deciding not how much to say, but in what order to say it. They were working for a group of people who have an interest in my affairs. he said. Not in yours. The investigation of our marriage began as a result of your cousin's challenge, but someone else has used that challenge as an opportunity to look more closely at me. She looked at him steadily. I need you to tell me who you are. Yes, he said, I know. He stood up and walked to the window and stood there for a moment, and she waited, because she was very good at waiting, and she had learned long ago that the people who spoke into silence always told you less than the people who had chosen when to speak. He turned around. My full name, he said, is Adidara Kingsley Afolabi. You may have heard the name Kingsley Afolabi in connection with property development in Lagos and the Southwest. She had heard the name. She kept her face completely still. My father was Emmanuel Kingsley Afolabi. He built the company over 40 years. I inherited the majority shares 11 years ago when he died. I have been running the company since I was 27. He paused. The business press has a name for me that I find unnecessarily dramatic. They call me the Duke because of the land holdings and because journalists like to give people titles. She said nothing. He continued. My board of directors inserted a morality clause into the company charter 4 years ago during a restructuring. It was proposed by a faction of the board that did not want to be seen as opposing me directly. The clause requires that within specified review periods, the executive chairman demonstrate personal stability and family commitment, as they worded it. The last review period was triggered in April. The clause required me to demonstrate that commitment within 90 days. The silence in the room was very specific. You needed a wife, she said. Yes. For the same reason, I needed a husband. Yes. She looked at him. She thought about the cafe, the 2 sentences, no photograph, no list of credentials. She thought about the registry office and the rings he had bought at a jeweler on Broad Street, and the signature that was not the signature of a consultant. She thought about the car and the gate and the house in Ikoyi, and the absence of photographs. You read my listing, she said, and you recognized a transaction you understood. Yes. And you thought that helping me with my problem would solve your problem at the same time. Yes. She sat with this for a long moment. The people investigating us, she said, are working for the board faction that inserted the morality clause. They want to find evidence that the marriage is contractual. If they find it, they can argue that I have violated the spirit of the clause even if not its letter, and they will use that to trigger the restructuring. And if I lose the estate challenge because the marriage is declared fraudulent, she said, you also lose your argument that the clause is satisfied. Yes. So we have the same problem from both sides. We have always had the same problem, he said. We simply did not know it when we sat down at the cafe. She stood up. She walked to the window, not because there was anything to look at, but because she needed to move, needed to think while moving, the way she always thought best. Outside the garden was dark and quiet and very still. She turned around. We need to reframe everything, she said. Not as 2 people who made a legal arrangement, as 2 people who were already building something when the circumstances made formalizing it urgent. The timeline has to work from the evidence backward. 8 months of contact, some of it provable through digital records if we structured it right. He looked at her. That would require retrofitting a shared history. Not inventing one, selecting from what actually happened and arranging it into the shape of what should have been. She came back to the table and sat down. This is what lawyers do, Dara. We do not fabricate facts. We find the facts that tell the true story. He was quiet for a moment. The true story, he said slowly, being that 2 people with compatible problems found each other and decided the solution made sense. Yes. That is not a love story. No, she said, but it is a true story, and if we tell it right, it will not need to be a love story, it will need to be a real one. He looked at her for a long time, not the way he had looked at her in the cafe, calculating and precise, something slightly different. She could not name the difference exactly. All right, he said. She opened her folder. They worked for 3 hours. She asked questions and he answered them, and she wrote everything down, and he asked questions about her that she answered, and by the end of the evening they had a timeline, a shared story of 8 months, and the beginning of a strategy for what came next. It was almost 11 when she picked up her bag. He walked her to the front door. At the door she paused, because there was something she had been holding back all evening, the way you hold something back when you are not yet sure what to do with it. You could have told me who you were, she said, at the cafe. I could have, he said. Why didn't you? He considered this for a moment. Because if I had told you who I was, you would have decided what I wanted before I had the chance to tell you. And what I wanted was to be useful to you on even terms, not to complicate your decision with a name. She looked at him. That is either very considerate or very calculated, she said. It is both, he said. Most useful things are. She went down the steps to the car that was waiting. The gate opened. Lagos received her back into itself, loud and bright and full of other people's lives, and she sat in the back of the car with her folder on her knees and the ring on her finger, and the knowledge that she was married to the man the business press called the Duke of Lagos, and she had not known, and he had known she had not known, and he had let it be that way on purpose. The question she was not asking herself was whether that bothered her. The question she was asking herself was why it did not. On Tuesday morning, Adiz received a phone call from her aunt, her father's older sister, a woman named Auntie Ngozi who had the particular talent of calling at the exact moment you least wanted to hear from her. I heard you got married, Auntie Ngozi said without any greeting. Good morning, Auntie. Is it true? Yes. A pause so loaded it had its own weight. To who? His name is Dara, Adidara Kingsley Afolabi. You may have heard the name. The pause on the other end changed quality entirely. It became the pause of a woman who was recalibrating everything she had been prepared to say. Kingsley Afolabi, her aunt said. The property family. Yes. Adiz, her aunt's voice had shifted from accusatory to something considerably more complicated. When did this happen? We registered last week. It was a private ceremony. I wanted to wait until things were settled before making any announcements. Why did I not meet him? Why did no one in this family meet him before? Because, Adiz said carefully, we did not want a large event. We wanted something quiet. I will bring him to meet everyone properly very soon. Another pause. Emeka is going to be very angry. Emeka, Adiz said, is welcome to whatever feelings he has about it. She ended the call, put her phone face down on her desk, and stared at the ceiling for exactly 15 seconds. Then she picked up her phone and wrote to Dara, My family knows. We need to appear at a family dinner by the end of this week. Are you available Saturday? He replied inside 2 minutes, Yes, send me the details. She sat back in her chair. She thought about Saturday, about sitting across a table from her mother and her aunties and her uncle Chidi, and possibly her cousin Emeka himself, all of them watching this man with the careful, measuring attention of a family that loved her, and was going to dissect him with the precision of people who had been disappointed before, and did not intend to be disappointed again. She thought about what Dara had said in his sitting room in Ikoyi. Most useful things are both considerate and calculated. She pulled a fresh sheet of paper toward her and began writing the questions her family would ask him. By the time she finished the list, it was 2 pages long, both sides. She photographed it and sent it to him. His reply came 20 minutes later. It was a second list, his questions about her, her family, the specific dynamics, the things you had to know to walk into a room and make people believe you belonged there. She read his list and was quiet for a long time. The questions were precise and warm at the same time, which was a combination she had not expected. Not cold strategic gathering of data, but the kind of questions a person asked because they understood that a family was not an organization chart, and that the only way to make people believe you loved their person was to actually know her. She did not examine what that meant. She answered his questions. He answered hers. They exchanged lists for the rest of the day, back and forth, message by message, building something that was beginning to feel less like a briefing document and more like a conversation. By Thursday, she knew that his father had died when he was 27, and that he had never quite stopped feeling that he had been given the company too soon, though he would not have said that to most people. She knew that he had 2 close friends, both of them from university, both of them now working outside Nigeria. She knew that he read more than almost anyone she had ever met, and that the books in his sitting room were not decoration. By Thursday, he knew that her grandfather had taught her chess when she was 6, and that she still played, alone sometimes, moving the pieces on both sides. He knew that she had almost quit law in her second year of practice when a case she had been certain of went badly, and that Bissy had been the person who had talked her back from the edge of that decision. He knew that she was not afraid of very much, but that she was afraid of becoming someone who had stopped being surprised by the world. On Friday evening, she realized that she had spoken to him, by message and by phone, every day for the past 9 days. She sat with that fact for a moment. Then she put it away in the drawer with the watch and the signature and the gate and the house in Ikoyi, and she went to bed, and she did not think about what was accumulating in that drawer, because she had a family dinner tomorrow and a legal challenge to prepare for and a $4.2 million inheritance that was not yet entirely secure, and those were the things she was focusing on. Those were the things. Saturday arrived the way Saturdays arrived in Lagos in the rainy season, gray and warm and soft around the edges, the kind of morning that made the city look more forgiving than it usually did. Adi's mother lived in Surulere, in the same house where Adi's had grown up, and the family gathered there for dinners in the way that families with a strong matriarch gathered, which was to say everyone came because not coming was not really an option. Adi's arrived first, which she always did. Her mother, a small, precise woman named Chidinma who had taught secondary school mathematics for 31 years, and who had the particular sharpness of someone who had spent decades identifying exactly where students were going wrong, met her at the door. "Where is he?" her mother said. "He is coming, he will be here by 7. "Good," her mother looked at her. "You look tired." "I am fine." "You look tired and you are wearing the gold earrings, which you only wear when you are nervous." "I wear them on important occasions." "Those are the same thing for you." Her mother held the door open. "Come inside." The house was full by 6:30. Her uncle Chidi was there with his wife, Auntie Adiz, after whom she had been named, who had always been her favorite aunt and who had squeezed her hand upon arriving in a way that communicated everything. Her cousin Ifai was there with her husband. 2 of her mother's friends who were not technically family but attended every family event were there. And in the corner of the sitting room, arms folded, with the expression of a man who had arrived prepared for battle, was Emeka. He had come. She had not expected him to come, and his presence here in her mother's house, at a dinner that was ostensibly to celebrate her marriage, told her that he was not planning to accept this quietly at all. He met her eyes across the room. She looked at him calmly, and he looked at her, and neither of them said anything, and then a car pulled up outside, and everyone in the room who had been pretending not to be watching the door stopped pretending. Adiz went to the front door and opened it before he could knock. He was standing on the step in the gray evening light. He was wearing a dark suit with a white shirt, and he had brought something, a bottle of wine and what appeared to be a wrapped box, which was a detail she had not suggested and had not expected. For just a moment, on her mother's front step, she looked at him and he looked at her, and she had the brief, clear thought that whatever else this situation was, he was a man who did not show up anywhere unprepared. "Ready?" she said quietly. "Yes," he said equally quietly. "You?" "Yes," she said, and she stepped back and let him in, and the room behind her went very still in the way rooms go still when something they have been waiting for has finally arrived. Her mother was the first to reach him. Chidinma Okonkwo, who had spent 31 years teaching mathematics and who had eyes that missed nothing and expected everything, walked up to Adidara Kingsley Afolabi and looked at him the way she looked at everything, carefully, completely, and without any softening. "You are the husband," she said. "I am," he said. "Mrs. Okonkwo, it is a privilege to meet you. Adiz speaks of you often." Her mother looked at him for a long, specific moment. Then she said, "Come in. We are eating at 7:30. If you are hungry now, there is food in the kitchen." It was, Adiz knew, the highest possible form of acceptance her mother was capable of in the first 5 minutes. She let out a breath she had not known she was holding. Across the room, Emeka unfolded his arms. The evening was a particular kind of test. Not an examination with questions on paper, but the older, more honest kind, the kind where you sit in someone's family home and eat their food and let them watch you, and either you fit into the space they are all quietly deciding you deserve to occupy, or you do not. He fit. Not in a way that tried too hard, which would have been worse than not fitting at all. He was not performing. He was simply present in the way that a person who was comfortable with themselves was present, and he answered questions and asked them and listened and laughed once or twice at the right moments. And when her Uncle Chitty asked him about the company, he spoke about it clearly and without arrogance. And when Ifai's husband asked him a pointed question about the property market, he gave a precise and honest answer that managed to disagree with part of the premise without being dismissive. Adiz watched all of this from across the table and said very little, which was not because she had nothing to say, but because she was watching, the way she always watched when she needed to understand something. What she was understanding was this: he was not performing a role. He was not acting like someone who had been briefed on her family. He was simply being himself, and it turned out that himself was someone her family could, with minimal effort, actually like. She had not planned for that. She had planned for competent, she had planned for presentable, she had planned for passable. She had not planned for him to make her Uncle Chitty laugh 3 times, or for her mother to refill his water glass herself, which her mother did for no one, ever, except people she had privately decided she approved of. And she had not planned for the moment, toward the end of dinner, when he had reached across the table to pass the serving dish and his hand had briefly brushed hers, and she had felt it, the warmth of it, specific and involuntary, in a way that had nothing to do with any clause in any contract. She looked down at her plate. Emeka left early. He made his excuses at 8:45, and her mother saw him out with the particular politeness she reserved for people she was being polite to rather than warm toward, and when the door closed behind him, something in the room relaxed almost audibly. At 9:30, when the dinner was winding down and the aunties were in the kitchen, and the men were in the sitting room having a second conversation she was not part of, Adiz went out to the back of the house, to the small concrete area behind the kitchen where there were 2 plastic chairs and a mango tree she had climbed as a child. She sat in one of the chairs. A few minutes later, he came and sat in the other one. They sat in the dark and the quiet for a moment, with the sounds of the family inside the house coming through the window, muffled and warm. "My mother refilled your water," she said. "I noticed," he said. "She does not do that." "I know," he said. "She told me at some point during dinner that you used to hide under this tree when you were small. She said you would come out here whenever the house was too loud." Adiz looked at the mango tree. "She told you that?" "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. What else did she say? "That you were a very serious child who asked too many questions, and that you have not changed in any way." She almost laughed, almost. "Your family loves you," he said simply. "It is in every room." She looked at the tree for another moment. "Did you ever have that?" she asked. "A house that felt like that?" She did not know why she asked it. It was not a question from any list. He was quiet for a moment, and the quiet had a different texture than usual. "For a time," he said, "when my father was alive." She did not ask anything further. She had asked too much already. But they sat there for a few more minutes in the dark, under the mango tree her mother had apparently told him about, and the night was soft and warm, and she did not feel, in that moment, any of the careful distance she had been maintaining since a cafe in Victoria Island, and she noted that, and she filed it, and the drawer in her mind was now so full it was not closing properly anymore. The summons came on a Wednesday. It was not unexpected. She had known, from the evening in his sitting room when he had told her about the board faction and the investigators, that a formal challenge was coming. She had simply not known it would come in the form of an application to the Lagos State High Court, filed by barrister Emeka Akari on behalf of Chukwuemeka Okonkwo, requesting a judicial review of the Okonkwo estate settlement on the grounds that the marriage registered on the date in question was entered into for fraudulent and transactional purposes, and therefore did not satisfy the conditions of the original will. She read the filing twice. Then she called Dara. He answered on the first ring. "I have it," she said. "I know, my lawyers received a parallel notification. They have filed against the estate on the fraud grounds, which is what I expected, but they have also submitted an affidavit," she paused, "from one of the respondents to my listing." A brief silence. "Someone answered your original advertisement." "Yes, 47 people did. One of them is willing to testify that the marriage was transactional, on the basis that the listing he responded to was explicit about the contractual nature of the arrangement." "But he never met you." "He does not need to have met me. He has a screenshot of the listing. The listing is, by itself, evidence of intent. Another silence. This one was the kind that meant a person was thinking quickly and not speaking while they did it. "What do you need from me?" he said. "I need you to be completely honest with me about one thing." "Yes, sir." "Is there anything in your own situation, anything connected to the board, the company, the clause, anything at all, that they can use to make this worse? Any documentation that might surface? Any communication that connects your reason for entering this marriage to the company matter?" A pause. "There is one email. It was sent by my company secretary to my private account. It is a summary of my options for satisfying the morality clause. It includes as one of the options the phrase, a short-term formal arrangement. I had not considered it relevant when you and I first met. I should have told you." She sat very still. "Where is that email?" "On my private server." "Has your company secretary seen your phone, or had access to your accounts in the past 3 months?" "No." "Who else knows the contents of that email?" "Only my secretary, and now you." She processed this. "We can keep it contained, but only if we move on all other fronts immediately. If this goes before a judge, our defense cannot be that the marriage was purely personal. It has to be that the marriage was real, not just legal, real. The judge will look at evidence of genuine relationship, the family dinner, the duration of contact, the daily communication." "The screenshots," he said. "Yes, sir. I have all of them." "So do I." Another silence, different from all the others. "Adiz," he said, "there is something else I should tell you before this goes to a hearing." "Tell me." "The statement I intend to submit to the court. I want to write it myself, not have my lawyers draft it. I want you to read it before I submit it, but I want to write it." She looked at the filing on her desk. "All right, when can you have it ready?" "Tonight," he said. "Send it." "I will come with it," he said, "if that is acceptable." She looked at the clock. It was 4 in the afternoon. "Come at 7, she said. He came at 7. He sat in her office, the same office with the clean spare walls and the filing cabinet and the name on the door that she had chosen, and he set a single sheet of paper on her desk and said nothing and let her read it. She read it once. She read it again. The first 2 paragraphs were clear and factual. They described the circumstances of the marriage, the estate clause, his own professional situation, the parallel pressures that had brought them to the same solution at the same time. They were precise and honest and well written, and would have served their legal purpose entirely on their own. The 3rd paragraph was not the same as the first 2. The 3rd paragraph was short. It was 4 sentences. She read it twice more, and the room was very quiet around her, and the desk between them felt very small, and outside through the window the evening was doing what Lagos evenings did, bright and loud and indifferent. She put the paper down. She did not look at him immediately. She looked at the desk. "You do not have to include this," she said. "I know," he said. "The first 2 paragraphs are sufficient for the legal purpose." "I know," he said again. She looked up. He was watching her with the look she had catalogued and not been able to name, and she thought that now she could name it. It was the look of a person who had made a decision that had nothing to do with strategy and was at peace with that. "Dara," she said. "It is true," he said simply. "It is the most useful thing in the document because it is the only part that could not have been written in advance, and you taught me that." She looked at him for a long time. She thought about the cafe and the 2 sentences, and the rings that fit, and the house in Ikoyi with no photographs, and the mango tree in the dark, and her mother refilling his water glass, and the 11 minutes in the registry office, and the way he listened, with everything. She thought about the drawer that would not close. "I am going to read it again," she said. "Take your time," he said. She read it again. The 3rd paragraph said, "In the course of what began as a practical arrangement between 2 individuals responding to practical circumstances, I have come to understand that the woman I married is someone I would have wanted to know regardless of any clause or inheritance or board directive. I cannot speak to what she has decided about me, but I can say without legal ambiguity and without the assistance of counsel that what I feel toward her is not a performance. It is the only real thing in this document." She put the paper down for the 3rd time. "I need to think about whether this helps or hurts our case," she said. Take the night, he said. She looked at him. You are very calm about this. One of us has to be, he said. She almost did something then, she was not entirely sure what. But she caught it and she held it the way she held most things, and she said, I will call you in the morning. And he stood and picked up his jacket from the chair and he walked out of her office, and she listened to his footsteps in the corridor all the way to the lift, and then she was alone. She sat in her chair for a long time. She did not work, she did not make notes, she did not open any of the 3 client files that were still waiting on the corner of her desk. She read the 3rd paragraph one more time. Then she folded the paper carefully and put it in the inner pocket of her jacket, which was where she kept things she did not want to leave on her desk, and she went home. She made tea. She sat at her kitchen table where she had signed the email the night she posted the listing, the night before everything, and she looked at the ring on her finger in the kitchen light. She had been telling herself, since the cafe, since the registry, since Ikoi and the mango tree and the gold earrings she wore for important occasions, that this was a transaction. She was good at transactions. Transactions were clear and documented and had exit provisions and dissolution clauses. She was very good at law. She was beginning to suspect, considerably less good at recognizing when something had already outgrown the law that created it. She drank her tea. She went to bed. She did not sleep immediately. But when she did sleep, she did not dream about Clause 14, Subsection 3, or the settlement date, or Emeka's lawyer, or any of the things she would have expected to dream about. She dreamed about an empty chess board and a man sitting across from it who looked like he knew how to wait. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning, and Adiz arrived at the Lagos State High Court at 8:15, which was 45 minutes before she needed to be there, because she had never in her professional life arrived late to a courtroom, and she was not going to begin now. She wore the gray suit. She wore the earrings. She wore the ring. Her 2 junior associates from the firm were with her, carrying the case files she had prepared over the past 4 days, a set of documents that represented, she believed, the clearest and most thorough defense of the marriage's authenticity that the evidence would support. She had the timeline. She had the message history printed and arranged chronologically. She had witness statements from Bissy, from her uncle Chidi, from 2 people at a professional event in March that she had been able to identify, through careful research, as occasions when both she and Dara had been present, not together but present, which gave the timeline a grounding in verifiable fact. She had statements from his side as well, from colleagues and associates who had noted a change in his engagement over the preceding months, a shift in how he spoke about his personal life, vague but consistent, the kind of change that people who knew someone well noticed without being asked to look for it. And she had the 3rd paragraph. She had decided at 4 in the morning, sitting at her kitchen table with her 2nd cup of tea, that the 3rd paragraph stayed. She had made this decision not as a lawyer calculating advantage, though she had run the calculation and it did not hurt the case, but as a person who had been honest with herself in the small hours about what was actually in the drawer that would not close. The hearing room was smaller than the courtrooms where she usually appeared, a magistrate's court rather than a full bench, appropriate for a preliminary challenge of this kind. She took her seat at the respondent's table. Barrister Akari was already seated at the opposing table, looking satisfied with himself in the way that people looked when they thought they had already won. Dara arrived at 8:40. He sat in the row behind her to her left with his own lawyers. He did not speak to her when he sat down. He did not need to. She felt his presence the way you feel the specific gravity of something that has been in your orbit long enough to shift your path. The magistrate arrived, the proceedings opened. Barrister Akari presented the challenge, the listing, the affidavit from the respondent, the argument that the marriage had been entered into for financial gain rather than genuine personal commitment, and that it therefore did not satisfy the spirit of the estate clause. He was good, she gave him that. He built the argument cleanly and let the evidence sit without over-explaining it, which was what a good lawyer did. Then it was her turn. She stood up. She laid out the timeline. She laid out the communication history. She laid out the witness statements. She laid out, clearly and without drama, the fact that 2 people with compatible circumstances had found each other, that the circumstances did not create the relationship but had given it a structure, and that the court was being asked to treat the presence of mutual practicality as evidence against authenticity, which was a standard that, if applied consistently, would invalidate a significant portion of marriages in Lagos or anywhere else. The magistrate listened. Barrister Akari objected twice, once to the scope of the character evidence and once to the inclusion of what he called self-serving personal testimony, which was a characterization Adiz addressed with the particular precision she reserved for arguments she found both wrong and irritating. Then she submitted the personal statement. She submitted it without announcing it specifically. She placed it at the end of the documentary evidence, clearly labeled, and let it take its place in the sequence. The magistrate read it. The room was quiet. The magistrate read it again. Then the magistrate looked up and asked Barrister Akari whether he had any documentation to contradict the authenticity of the personal relationship described in the statement, meaning evidence specific to that characterization rather than the original listing. Barrister Akari said that the listing itself was sufficient to establish transactional intent. The magistrate said that the listing established the context in which the relationship had been formalized, not the nature of the relationship itself, and that formalizing an existing relationship in response to a legal deadline did not make the relationship itself transactional. Adiz had written the argument the magistrate had just made. She had written it at 2 in the morning on Tuesday. She heard her own logic coming back to her from the bench and felt a particular satisfaction that was quiet and deep and entirely professional. The hearing took 40 minutes. The magistrate dismissed the challenge. The estate settlement would proceed in her name. The marriage was upheld as legally valid and authentically constituted. Barrister Akari gathered his papers with the controlled movements of a man who had expected a different result. Her junior associates released their breath. She stood for a moment in the courtroom after the magistrate left, with the files in front of her and the ring on her finger, and the particular feeling of having won something that had been much harder to win than it appeared from the outside. She turned around. Dara was standing at the end of the row, his lawyers already moving toward the door. He was watching her with the look she could name now and had been able to name since the night in her office when she had read the 3rd paragraph. She walked toward him. She stopped when there was about a meter between them, which was the professional distance, the distance she maintained in all her dealings, the distance she was very good at maintaining. "We won," she said. "You won," he said. "I watched. Your statement helped." "I know." She looked at him. The 3rd paragraph. "Yes, it was effective." He looked at her. "That is not the most important thing about it." The corridor outside the courtroom was filling up with other people going to other hearings, and someone pushed through the door near them, and the room got briefly louder, and she was aware of being in a public place in her professional capacity, and also aware of being very close to a man who had, in a courtroom document submitted to a magistrate, said something that could not be unsaid. "I know it is not," she said. He waited. She looked at him for a long moment with everything in the drawer: the watch, the signature, the gate, the garden, the mango tree, her mother's water glass, the chess board in the dream. She thought about the dissolution clause, still unsigned, still sitting in the contract folder on her desk at home. "I am not very good," she said carefully, "at things I have not planned for." "I know," he said. "I planned for a transaction." "I know. I did not plan for any of this." He looked at her with something that was not quite a smile, but was close enough that it occupied the same space. "Neither did I," he said. She nodded once, a brief, precise nod, the kind that means I have understood everything that was said and everything that was not said. She picked up her folder. "I have to get back to the office," she said. "I know." But she paused. "Are you free this evening?" He looked at her. "Not for work," she said. He was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet she had learned to read. "Yes," he said. 7 o'clock, she said, "the Terrace Cafe." "I will be there," he said. She walked out of the courtroom into the bright hard light of the morning, and Lagos received her back the way it always did, loud and alive and uninterested in what had just shifted in a small hearing room on the 4th floor, and she walked to her car with her files under her arm and the ring on her finger, and the particular feeling of someone who has spent a very long time being excellent at what she does, and has just discovered, unexpectedly, at 29 years old. on a Thursday morning after a court victory, that she might be about to become excellent at something else entirely. The cafe was busy at 7, but not loud, the particular mid-evening fullness of a place that was halfway between dinner rush and the quieter hour that followed. She got there first. She chose the same table she had always chosen, the one at the back with the clear view of the entrance. She ordered water. Old habits were old habits. He came in at 7:03, which was the first time he had ever been late, and she noticed this the way she noticed everything and filed it and understood it for what it was. He sat down. The waiter came, they ordered coffee, the evening moved around them. For a moment neither of them said anything. Then he said, "How is the estate?" "Transferred into my name as of this afternoon. The solicitor confirmed by email at 4:30. The Ibajuleki land is secured. The Surruler property is secured. The company shares are secured. Your grandfather would have been pleased." She thought of the gold earrings, and the chess board in the old house in Surruler, and a man who had told her she was the sharpest of all his grandchildren, and had then buried a 1974 will clause in a document he had never updated. He would have been impossible about it, she said. He would have said he always knew it would work out. He would not have admitted for 1 second that he nearly gave everything to Emeka by accident. Sounds like a remarkable man. He was. They were quiet for a moment, a comfortable quiet, the kind she had not noticed becoming comfortable until just now. "The board," she said, "your situation." "Resolved." The faction that filed the investigation withdrew their challenge yesterday afternoon. The marriage certificate, the public record of the dinner, the hearing outcome, it was sufficient. "So you are safe?" "Yes." "The company is intact?" "Yes." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. She looked at the table, then at him. "We have both solved what we needed to solve." "Yes," he said. "The contract has a dissolution clause." "I know." She looked at him directly. "I have not signed it." "I know," he said very quietly. "Neither have I." She sat with this for a moment. She was very aware of the cafe around them, of the other people at other tables, of the evening traffic on the street outside, of the particular ordinary aliveness of everything in the room that had nothing to do with them. "I should tell you something," she said. He waited. "I'm not easy to be around," she said. "I work very long hours. I'm not naturally warm. I plan everything and I find it difficult when things do not go according to plan. I have strong opinions about almost every subject and I am frequently right, which does not always make me pleasant. I do not talk about how I feel until I have thought about it for so long that the moment is usually past. And I am very, very bad at not knowing what I want and admitting it at the same time." He looked at her for a long moment. "I know all of that," he said. "You know some of it." "I know all of it," he said again, and his voice was the quiet voice, the real one, not the voice that managed situations. "I have been paying attention since the cafe." She looked at him. "I want to be clear," she said. "This is not a transaction." "No," he said, "it is not. And I have not planned this." "I know. I do not know what it is yet." "That is all right," he said. "Neither do I. But I would like to find out." She looked at him for a long time, this man she had hired to solve a problem and who had, in the course of solving it, become a problem of an entirely different and considerably more interesting kind. She thought about the contract on her desk. She thought about the dissolution clause. She thought about the watch, and the signature and the gate that opened before the car reached it, and the rings that fit, and the mango tree in the dark, and her mother who had refilled his water glass and told him about a little girl who hid under the tree when the house was too loud. She thought about a chess board and a man who knew how to wait. She picked up her coffee cup. "All right," she said. He looked at her, not the managing look, the real one. "All right," he said. Outside, Lagos did what it always did, and the evening moved toward night, and in a cafe on Walter Carrington Crescent 2 people who had met under the most practical of circumstances sat across from each other with their coffee cooling, and the whole of whatever came next still entirely unwritten, and neither of them was in any hurry. The dissolution clause would remain unsigned. They had not said this. They did not need to. Some things Adiz had been learning lately did not need to be said to be known. They simply were, the way the ring on her finger was, simple and gold and exactly the right size, sitting there in the cafe light as though it had always been there and had never been anything other than real.